Hi, my name is Joyce Caggiano, and I live with a nurse who is the director of a nursing home. And in this current problem that we're having with the coronavirus, she is worried they're going to run out of masks, medical masks. So we both came up with the idea of how are we going to solve the problem. And I love to sew, and so we have come up with a design. It's not original in that some people have provided the sort of beginning, and we have morphed it or changed it into a mask that we feel will be very helpful in a nursing home especially. So the pattern pieces I have, believe it or not, I have them for children, the masks. So I have an extra large pattern, a large pattern, and a small pattern piece. The one that's extra large works very well for my daughter, who's a large person. This one is a sample of the large. It goes over the face like this, and I will show you how to sew in a little piece of wire so that the mask can be conformed to your nose. So I have changed my style of doing this. I had begun by making these masks closed on the ends, and that works very well. It's simple to sew, but my daughter and I figured that we really ought to have a way of sliding a impervious or semi-impervious material between the lining and the outer portion in order to have it be more protective. And we'll talk about that later. So I'm going to show you first how to put the masks that are finished onto the face, just so you have an idea where we're going. So you have to loosen there's a little, I call it a push toggle. And it has a little spring in it, so you can tighten it. Anyway, so it goes like this. Actually, I'm going to take this one because it's a little bit larger. My grandchildren have these. They're 8 and 10. So it goes over your head like this. So if you're not using it, you can just let it hang. It's probably bothering the microphone, but anyway. So the upper elastic goes up high or as comfortable as you like. You can bend it around your nose. You don't have to worry about it fitting behind the ear, so it's less irritating. And it goes underneath the chin. So a person who's larger needs a longer curve because you start talking and you can pull it down like that. So you can wear it on your head, you can wear it around your neck, or if you're have that kind of hair, you can wear it as a kind of a hair piece. And the nice thing about them, of course, is that they can be washed, especially if you have sanitizing cycle on your washing machine. So I'm going to put this aside. So let's start. So I'm going to choose the middle size to show you. So the fabric I use, this is a little bit coarser, but the kind of fabric that you use to do quilting is perfect. 100% cotton, it's soft, it's pliable, and you can do it in many different colors, like here. So first things first, you need a rectangle large enough to cover the pattern piece. Then you want to you have 2 layers, and make sure that the layers face one another so they are right sides together. And then you can cut. So I'm just going to put this aside, and I'm going to begin cutting the first pattern piece. So one of the, I forgot to say this. Every piece of fabric has a grain. And with these masks, you don't want it to be going sideways on the grain, because when you do that, when the piece is finished, it stretches in odd ways, and that will really make you feel frustrated. So if you can line up the straight line on the pattern piece so that it is parallel to the edge of the fabric that way, or you can actually do it this way as well, just making sure that it's straight with the grain of the fabric. So I'm going to cut. Now, if you're not as adept or not adept at cutting, you can use a pin and pin the right through the paper. So there we are. We have a pattern piece. So before we go to the next step, I'm going to show you that I make a lining. So I have fabric that is a lighter color, but it can be the same color. You want it lighter, and that is going to fit. It's a pattern piece exactly like the one for the outside, and it will fit inside the mask when you finish. So, okay, you have your first pattern piece. Cut out the lining and the outer edge. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine. Hi, here I am again, and I'm at my favorite place, at my sewing machine. And I'm just going to show you how to sew around the edge of the mask piece, the center piece. So I like to start my sewing really close to the edge, and we want a little more than a 1/4 inch space between the stitching and the edge of the fabric. So now that I've put my foot down, and I don't mean in a mean way, I'm going to start the machine, and then the thing that you can't see that that you need to know is I move the fabric with my hands. It's really intuitive, but necessary. So as it's, all right, you know what, I'm going to stop it so it'll go a little bit slower. So you see I'm pulling the fabric around, and what I do is I watch how the edge of the foot of the machine follows the edge of the cloth, and that gives me just about the right width I want in my seam. So I did one of these already, and this is what it looks like. So now you have this delightful little curve, and that's the part that's going to go around your nose. So if you are an experienced sewer, you can top stitch. And if you're a sewer, you know that top stitch means that the stitching will show on the top of the fabric. But I'm not going to do that right now because it's a little complicated. So here is the mask on the outer part, and this is the lining that I cut out of white fabric, as I mentioned before. So I did this in advance to show you. You can see, again, it's the curve that matches the curve in the outer piece of fabric. So what I like to do is finish the edges of the lining, and that is because I like to have a pouch between, I call it a pouch, a space between the lining and the outer fabric. And I'll show you how that goes. So all I'm going to do here, I already did one side. I'm going to just turn this about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm just going to stitch it up again, starting, and this will give us a nice clean edge. Okay, when you do this, I forgot to mention that you're working on the wrong side. You want the raw edge of the fabric to be on the wrong side. Of the fabric, so that the right side looks really cool and tidy. Now, I'm going to take the outer fabric and the lining and put them together, and this is really important. You line them up, the two pieces of fabric that you've cut, and I use my finger and I push to make sure that they match up nicely, and the outer edges match up nicely. If you're an experienced sewer, you might use pins. I usually just go this way. So we are going to sew the top edge and the bottom edge only. We're not going to sew this because we want an opening here. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew the two pieces together. Now, when I start this, I'm going to go backwards and forwards, just because there's going to be a lot of stress on that opening and I want it to stay sewn. So now I'm going to go. Again, I'm watching the edge of my fabric so that it follows the edge of my foot. And it's going to, when I get to the middle, right there, I need to move my fabric. So I'm just gonna, this is this kind of thing that with experience you learn. You have control of the fabric, and the fabric will just begin to wrinkle if you're not really careful. So I'm always making sure that the fabric is flat. And again, I'm coming to the end. I'm going to stop. I'm going to go backwards and forwards and a little bit backwards and then stop. Okay, so I am now going to show you how to put the wire in. I'm not going to demonstrate how to do the bottom edge. It goes exactly the same way you do the top edge. You do not sew the sides. You leave the sides open. So we need to stop so I can get the wire to put in. Okay, so now we're going to insert the wire, and it may seem like a complicated thing, but it's really not. So this is wire you can buy online. It's craft wire, and you can use scissors to cut it, but I don't like to wreck my scissors, so I have a cutter, a wire cutter. So what you need is a piece of wire that's, 4 inches long. You can use pipe cleaner. In fact, pipe cleaner would work very well because it would probably be a little softer. Okay, so here's my mask, and remember, this is the nose, the part that's going over the nose, like this. And here's the way that you insert the wire so that it won't go away or hurt you or anyone. So what I do is I just place it, it's very flexible. I place it between the stitching and the raw edge. That means that when you turn it over, you won't even see this. So here I'm going to, and what I use is a simple zigzag stitch. So I'm going to turn my machine to a zigzag. This is a really great machine. It's easy to do. Other machines would do it differently. Anyway, here we go. So I'm holding down the wire, and it generally conforms when the needle goes near it. It pushes the wire away. So it doesn't tend to go into the wire. If it does, if the needle hits the wire, it's okay. The only thing that suffers is sometimes I have had the wire break. It doesn't hurt my machine. But you'll have to measure that depending on the machine that you're using to do this. But it's a simple zigzag stitch. Most machines have a way of making buttonholes, for example, and a buttonholer would be a perfect stitch for this. Okay, so now when I'm coming to the very end of the end of the wire is sharp and it can pierce the fabric, and I don't want that. So I like to do several back and forth stitches, and then I go backwards, and then I'll go forwards again, like this, so that when I'm done, you can see that the tip of the wire is covered very nicely. Now, I really like the way this works. It's pretty and functional. So now, if you were making the mask, this is just prototype, you would have stitching all along this side and a pocket between. So let's imagine that, and I'm going to turn it right side out. It'd be like turning your sleeve inside out or right side out. And when you do that, the wire is completely invisible and it's inside. And there you have the mask. And then I go to the ironing board and I iron it. And now I'm going to show you the very last piece before assembling, and that has to do with the tail, the sides. So let me get a prototype here. All right. Now I'm going to just show you. I'm not actually going to sew this on the sewing machine. So here is the finished edge. So now that we've finished sewing the bottom and turned it right side out, you have a raw edge of fabric here. And all you're going to do, I'm going to do this up here, is roll this once very tightly, like that. I'm going to show you, do this, maybe I will. Once very tightly. Oops. And that's a mistake that I often make. I forgot to go back to a single stitch. It's one of the problems when you have something that's so easy to do. Okay, but that's not going to show. So, all right, now, so I did one side and one level of stitching, and now I'm going to create the hole that the elastic is going to go into. So this is the finished one. It's much prettier than what I'm doing right here, but I'll just show you. So what you need is you need at least a quarter of an inch here, because the elastic is a quarter of an inch wide and it is going to go through there. So I'm making that little pouch right here. So when you're finished, I'm going to put that aside because this one's better. And show you that here we have the pouch. The bottom end has been sewn. And let me do this, finish this one. I'll put it under the machine here. And let it go. Okay, so now the pouch, this should have been a little bit wider, but when you finish, or when you do a few of these, you'll understand why you need this space here. And that is the mask at this stage. There's just one more thing to do, and that is what I call assemble the mask. Okay, so now we're going to do the final touch. And what we need is elastic. This is just your plain old ordinary elastic you can buy in any store, even sometimes grocery stores have. So you need 1 yard. So I have a tape measure here, and I go 1 yard, and I cut. Now, it's important, that's too far, that you make a point when you cut. And you'll understand that in a minute. So this elastic has to go through this slot that we've made, like that. But you're not going to be able to do it. You'll end up getting stuck. So the easy way to do it is to take a safety pin like this, and you pin through the elastic parallel to the elastic, like that. Now I'm going to close the pin. Now it becomes a guide. The pin becomes a guide through this slot. Now it can sometimes catch and be a little bit hard to do, but you just, with a little pinching and pushing and pulling, I'm sliding that safety pin through the slot, and here it comes. I've threaded through the sleeve on either side. I already did this one, so I'm just showing you. And now I'm going to take the pin off, and now I'm going to put the spring clip, what I'm calling a spring clip. Now this is a really cool thing. I got, I don't know, 60 of these for $8. When you push the spring down, you get a space. When you let the spring up, the space is gone, and that's what is going to help you to adjust the mask when you put it on. So the tricky part is if you have arthritis like I do, it can be difficult. But you pinch, so you have the hole, and now I'm going to push the elastic through. I'm going to stop, and now I'm going to take the other piece. Again, I push down to open the hole, and then I push the elastic through. If you have a 5-year-old child, they could probably help. And that is the finished product. Here's the mask, and that is the way that it slides onto your head and stays there comfortably. And that's it.